After an operation they say targeted people in the U.S. illegally with criminal histories, more than 200 arrests were made.
At 3:45 a.m., while most American cities were still fast asleep, federal forces launched a coordinated attack on a hidden criminal system that no one had imagined existed. This wasn't a routine drug bust or random arrest, but a targeted, large-scale operation orchestrated by ICE, FBI, and federal agents. For years, a criminal organization had been operating quietly in the shadows, nestled within peaceful neighborhoods where no one suspected a thing. As the operation unfolded, explosive secrets began to unravel, shaking the very foundation of security systems. What's about to be revealed next could signal a much larger underground battle yet to be uncovered. Subscribe to Military Power to follow this story, as what's just been uncovered could signal a much larger war unfolding in the shadows. It was 4:30 a.m., and the streets of Minneapolis were still wrapped in darkness, with most of the city's residents fast asleep. But the quiet was about to be shattered. Federal agents moved in unison, their vehicles roaring as they reached their designated targets. Ice-cold air cut through the city as the operation began. ICE, FBI, and SWAT teams, armed to the teeth, descended upon 12 locations across the city. Their mission clear: dismantle a massive, transnational criminal network operating under the radar for years. These were not ordinary drug dealers. These were the architects of an underground empire, one that had quietly spread its roots deep into Minneapolis, thriving in the shadows. The raid was swift. A few minutes after the operation kicked off, agents stormed an apartment complex. The team's tactical units moved like a single, coordinated force, entering each building with precision. They wasted no time. The first suspect was dragged out of his bed, his confused face barely registering what was happening before he was slammed to the floor. His hands were cuffed behind his back before he even knew it. The fear in his eyes was matched only by the confusion of the other suspects. This wasn't a random drug bust. It was a deliberate, planned strike against a well-organized, ruthless group that had been operating in the shadows of Minneapolis for years. The ICE agents, backed by their federal colleagues, wasted no time in securing the scene. Each location had been carefully chosen, each arrest part of a larger, more complex effort to take down a network of criminal operations that reached far beyond the city. In every location, agents discovered evidence of drug trafficking, money laundering, and more. The faces of the arrested suspects were mostly blank, but the weight of the operation was not lost on them. They knew that they were part of something much bigger than they had anticipated. At one location, agents found stacks of cash hidden in the walls and under the floors, disguised as legitimate business profits. In another, agents uncovered documents revealing how deeply entrenched the criminal network was in local businesses, helping funnel illegal funds through various front companies. These were not small-time criminals. This was a sophisticated operation, one that had evaded detection for years, sheltered by a veil of legalities and business fronts. But the arrest of the 12 Somali suspects was just the beginning. These individuals were integral to the operation, but they were only a small part of the larger picture. The federal agents knew that to weaken the organization entirely, they would need to find the heart of the syndicate, the place where everything connected. That heart lay within an inconspicuous mansion owned by two well-established immigration attorneys. For years, these attorneys had built a reputation for helping families navigate the immigration system. Still, behind the scenes, they were deeply involved in organizing the gang's drug trade and money laundering operations. With the information gathered from the previous arrests, agents were now ready to target the mansion, the nerve center of the entire criminal operation. As dawn approached, FBI agents had already positioned themselves around the mansion, preparing for a coordinated breach. The structure, a sprawling three-story building with tall gates and high walls, appeared like any other wealthy home in the city, but agents knew better. The mansion was a front. Its true purpose was far more sinister. Within minutes, the agents were inside. Flashbangs exploded, blinding the suspects inside, and the sound of boots hitting marble floors echoed through the hallways as agents flooded the mansion. They made their way through the vast rooms, past expensive art and grand furniture, but their eyes were not on the decor. They were focused on what was hidden beneath, behind false walls, within the floors. Deep in the basement, the agents discovered the hidden entrance to the underground tunnel. This was no ordinary tunnel. The path stretched over 1,200 feet, dug carefully and reinforced to carry heavy loads through an underground labyrinth. It was built to last, designed for one purpose: moving drugs and money without detection. The tunnel was wide enough for a golf cart to pass through, its walls lined with industrial LED lights and air systems that kept it functioning in the dark. It wasn't just a means of transport, it was the core of the syndicate's operations. Inside the tunnel, agents found what they had been searching for: vacuum-sealed bricks of cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine stacked in neat piles. The smell of freshly sealed packages lingered in the air. Along with the drugs, they found $18.7 million in bundled cash, stored in waterproof military-grade cases, just waiting to be transported to its final destination. But what truly stunned the agents were the advanced tools they uncovered next: encrypted satellite phones, thermal imaging devices, and motion sensors placed along the tunnel's entire length to monitor any movement. This wasn't just a drug smuggling operation, it was a well-organized network capable of evading law enforcement for years. Further investigation revealed more layers of the operation. Sealed hard drives, encrypted servers, and a leather-bound ledger, signed with the alias Architect 7, all pointed to one man: Ismail Karim Noir, an immigration attorney with years of experience in the legal field. On the surface, he had been an advocate for asylum seekers, a public figure who spoke out for justice. But the files exposed a darker truth. Ismail Karim Noir was the mastermind behind the entire operation, the one who coordinated the movement of drugs, money, and even people across borders. This discovery was just the beginning of the unraveling of a massive criminal empire. The investigation showed that the syndicate wasn't just confined to Minneapolis. Its reach extended far beyond, with tunnels stretching into other cities and states. The syndicate had designed a permanent underground logistics empire, one that could operate for decades, protected by a combination of legal immunities, corrupt officials, and a deep web of shell companies. As the agents continued to sift through the documents and data recovered, it became clear that the syndicate had one goal: to remain undetected, to build an invisible empire. But with the raids now underway, the network's grip on the Midwest had begun to slip. This organization was a sophisticated, almost military-level logistical network that had been built specifically to transport drugs and launder money, free from the watchful eyes of authorities. What made the situation even more alarming was that these tunnels were not just a short-term solution. They were designed for permanence. The syndicate had planned for long-term control, ensuring that their underground routes could be used indefinitely. They weren't just shipping narcotics, they were planning to set up a fully operational system that would keep their illegal activities running for decades. The agents knew they were dealing with a level of planning and precision rarely seen in criminal organizations. At the same time, agents began to understand the full extent of the corruption protecting the operation. The cartel had successfully infiltrated local law enforcement, government offices, and even the judiciary. Police officers had been paid off to protect shipments, allowing them to move freely through heavily monitored areas. Judges were bribed to dismiss charges, release cartel members on minimal bail, or provide favorable verdicts in exchange for luxury gifts and cash payments. Even politicians had been compromised, receiving campaign contributions routed through the syndicate's fake nonprofits to influence votes and block bills that would have hindered the cartel's operations. The agents also uncovered evidence that local authorities had deliberately ignored many of the tunnel systems and hidden smuggling routes. Patrolling routes were altered to create blind spots, allowing shipments to pass unnoticed. Several senior officers had been aware of these routes, but chose to look the other way, making it clear that the cartel's corruption ran deep. The investigation had only scratched the surface of how far the syndicate's influence reached. Every discovery made the agents more determined to bring the network to its knees. Despite the operation's overwhelming size, the agents refused to back down. With each arrest, each piece of evidence uncovered, they were getting closer to dismantling the syndicate. But the challenges were far from over. The operation had exposed just how deeply embedded the syndicate was in the region's fabric, and the agents knew that if they didn't act swiftly, the cartel might regroup and rebuild. The next phase of the investigation was critical. They had to track the full flow of narcotics, money, and people across the country, following the trail left behind by the cartel. The syndicate had already shown its ability to operate with alarming efficiency, moving vast quantities of drugs and cash across state lines without detection. Now the agents had to find a way to permanently disrupt their operations and stop the flow before it could spread further. The operation's success would depend on how quickly the agents could trace the final connections from the tunnels to the fake businesses and beyond. But one thing was clear. The cartel had underestimated the reach of federal law enforcement. What had begun as a routine investigation had now morphed into a nationwide operation to take down one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in the country. As the investigation reached its critical stage, the agents had learned that the syndicate wasn't just a group of drug dealers, it was a fully operational criminal empire built to last. But the agents had also uncovered its Achilles heel. Now that the network had been exposed, it was time to begin dismantling the pieces one by one. The discovery of the tunnel marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. What initially seemed like a simple underground passage turned out to be the lifeblood of the cartel's operation. The agents ventured deeper into the tunnel, finding it reinforced with steel, lined with industrial LED lights, and equipped with a ventilation system that kept it operational for long stretches. The agents understood quickly that this tunnel wasn't just a short-term solution for moving drugs. It was a permanent fixture, carefully constructed to evade detection for years. Inside, they found what they had been hoping for: the cartel's illicit goods. The agents uncovered 2.64 tons of drugs, including cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine, all vacuum sealed and ready to be shipped across the country. Alongside the drugs, they found $18.7 million in cash, meticulously packed into waterproof containers. The sheer size of the operation sent shockwaves through the team. This wasn't just a localized trafficking network, this was a transnational criminal syndicate moving massive quantities of drugs and cash without fear of detection. But it wasn't just the drugs and money that made this find so significant. It was the way the cartel had engineered its operation. The tunnel itself was not just for transport. It had been built to be invisible. The cartel had carefully designed it to move goods undetected, hidden beneath businesses and residential properties. But even more revealing were the tools found inside: encrypted satellite phones, motion sensors, and hidden cameras placed along the tunnel. These gadgets were a clear sign that the cartel had gone to extreme lengths to ensure the operation remained hidden from authorities. As agents pieced together the information, they realized the true extent of the cartel's protective network. These weren't just random criminals. They had been operating with impunity for years, shielded by a network of corrupt officials. The agents found evidence that police officers were on the cartel's payroll, accepting monthly bribes to disregard illegal shipments and delay responses to calls that might interfere with the cartel's operations. These officers were strategically placed to ensure the cartel's shipments moved smoothly through heavily monitored areas. The corruption didn't stop there. As agents continued to dig, they found evidence of bribed judges who had been paid off to ensure that cartel members received light sentences or even had their cases dismissed. These judges manipulated the legal system, ensuring that the cartel's members received minimal punishment, if any at all. The accurate scale of this corruption was staggering. 12 police officers and several judges were found to be working directly with the cartel, actively protecting it from any legal consequences. But the most disturbing part was the involvement of politicians. Through more documents found during the raid, the agents uncovered a clear link between the cartel and state legislators who had been receiving campaign donations funneled through fake nonprofit organizations. In return for these bribes, these politicians had blocked critical legislation that would have provided resources for law enforcement to fight organized crime. They had also voted against bills designed to stop illegal trafficking routes, ensuring the cartel's continued operations. This level of corruption went beyond what anyone had anticipated. It became clear that the cartel had created a parallel system of governance, operating outside the rule of law. Not only did they control the streets and businesses, but they also had their hands deep in the political and judicial systems, ensuring that their illegal activities went unchallenged. The discovery of these corrupt officials was the final piece of the puzzle, exposing just how far the cartel's influence had spread. With this new information, the agents knew that dismantling the cartel would require more than just taking down its physical operations. It would mean taking down the entire system that had allowed it to thrive for years. The arrests of key cartel members and corrupt officials were just the beginning. The agents would need to track the full flow of money, identify every fake business, and expose every corrupt individual involved. Only then could they ensure that the cartel's network would be permanently destroyed. Despite the scale of the cartel's operations, the agents refused to back down. They knew that the corruption they had uncovered was just one part of the story, and they had to keep pushing forward. The cartel had used its underground system to evade detection for years, but now the agents had the advantage. With each arrest and discovery, they were taking down the empire piece by piece, ensuring that the cartel would not be able to regroup and continue its operations. The streets of Minneapolis had barely begun to stir when the agents started to piece together the magnitude of the operation. Their work was not only about breaking down doors and making arrests, it was about uncovering the vast network that stretched far beyond Minnesota. As they sifted through evidence, a clearer picture began to form. This wasn't just a local gang working in isolation. This was an international syndicate, its tendrils reaching across the Midwest and beyond. The investigators soon realized that the syndicate's smuggling routes spanned a vast expanse across the country. From Minneapolis, their network stretched through Chicago, Detroit, and Cleveland, each city serving as a key hub for trafficking. The scale of the operation was nothing short of staggering. The syndicate had perfected its method, using front companies, shell corporations, and false legal documents to mask its activities. The agents knew that they weren't just facing a street-level gang. They were dismantling a highly sophisticated transnational criminal network that had learned how to hide its operations in plain sight. As the investigation progressed, agents uncovered detailed records of shipments moving across the region. Refrigerated trucks, marked as food delivery vehicles, passed through way stations unnoticed. The drivers, often complicit in the operation, used forged credentials to bypass checkpoints without raising suspicion. The trucks traveled from one city to another, stopping at safe houses where the illicit cargo was unloaded and redistributed. Every step of the process had been meticulously planned and executed, ensuring that the cartel could move vast quantities of narcotics, money, and contraband undetected. The more the agents dug, the clearer it became. The syndicate had designed its operations to be impervious to law enforcement. Their use of shell companies not only obscured the ownership of the businesses involved, but also provided a layer of protection that made it difficult to trace the proper flow of goods. The cartel had experts in finance and logistics who manipulated laws and exploited legal loopholes to their advantage. At times, it seemed as though every aspect of their business model was constructed with one goal in mind: evade detection. But the syndicate's reach didn't stop at businesses or transportation. As federal agents traced the routes further, they made another chilling discovery: a system of underground tunnels connecting points across the region. These tunnels, hidden beneath seemingly innocuous locations such as dental offices and empty warehouses, were used to bypass law enforcement entirely. At one point, agents stumbled upon a tunnel that stretched 800 feet, connecting a small suburban office to a lakefront warehouse. It was a sophisticated, almost military-level logistical network that had been built specifically to transport drugs and launder money, free from the watchful eyes of authorities. What made the situation even more alarming was that these tunnels were not just a short-term solution. They were designed for permanence. The syndicate had planned for long-term control, ensuring that their underground routes could be used indefinitely. They weren't just shipping narcotics, they were planning to set up a fully operational system that would keep their illegal activities running for decades. The agents knew they were dealing with a level of planning and precision rarely seen in criminal organizations. At the same time, agents began to understand the full extent of the corruption protecting the operation. The cartel had successfully infiltrated local law enforcement, government offices, and even the judiciary. Police officers had been paid off to protect shipments, allowing them to move freely through heavily monitored areas. Judges were bribed to dismiss charges, release cartel members on minimal bail, or provide favorable verdicts in exchange for luxury gifts and cash payments. Even politicians had been compromised, receiving campaign contributions routed through the syndicate's fake nonprofits to influence votes and block bills that would have hindered the cartel's operations. The agents also uncovered evidence that local authorities had deliberately ignored many of the tunnel systems and hidden smuggling routes. Patrolling routes were altered to create blind spots, allowing shipments to pass unnoticed. Several senior officers had been aware of these routes but chose to look the other way, making it clear that the cartel's corruption ran deep. The investigation had only scratched the surface of how far the syndicate's influence reached. Every discovery made the agents more determined to bring the network to its knees. Despite the operation's overwhelming size, the agents refused to back down. With each arrest, each piece of evidence uncovered, they were getting closer to dismantling the syndicate. But the challenges were far from over. The operation had exposed just how deeply embedded the syndicate was in the region's fabric, and the agents knew that if they didn't act swiftly, the cartel might regroup and rebuild. The next phase of the investigation was critical. They had to track the full flow of narcotics, money, and people across the country, following the trail left behind by the cartel. The syndicate had already shown its ability to operate with alarming efficiency, moving vast quantities of drugs and cash across state lines without detection. Now the agents had to find a way to permanently disrupt their operations and stop the flow before it could spread further. The operation's success would depend on how quickly the agents could trace the final connections, from the tunnels to the fake businesses and beyond. But one thing was clear: the cartel had underestimated the reach of federal law enforcement. What had begun as a routine investigation had now morphed into a nationwide operation to take down one of the most sophisticated criminal networks in the country. This operation has resulted in a significant victory for law enforcement, breaking apart a massive transnational criminal network and uncovering an underground system that trafficked drugs and money through complex smuggling routes and shell companies. Corruption within key public institutions had shielded these criminal activities for years, but ultimately, those protective systems were dismantled. Though this network has been taken down, its impact will resonate for years to come. This story serves as a stark reminder of how deeply crime can infiltrate public agencies and legal systems. The discovery shows that organized crime does not just operate in the shadows, it embeds itself in legitimate institutions, corrupting them to avoid detection. While the immediate threat has been neutralized, the long-term consequences of such infiltration are still being felt, and the lessons learned here will be critical in preventing future occurrences. The operation may have shattered a dangerous criminal empire, but the ripple effects of its corruption will continue to challenge law enforcement. More must be done to close the loopholes that allowed these operations to flourish. The fight against organized crime requires vigilance, transparency, and systemic reforms. to ensure that no network, no matter how well hidden, can thrive in the shadows of society. This case reminds us that when corruption is deeply rooted, the work of law enforcement is never finished. As long as these criminal syndicates remain, the vigilance and commitment of agencies will continue to be tested. Law enforcement must adapt and stay one step ahead to prevent these networks from regrowing. What are your thoughts on the level of corruption and the measures that criminal organizations can take to protect their operations? Can we prevent activities like this in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to Military Power for more in-depth coverage on these critical issues.